Everything in this video costs less than $50. And at that price, the gap between Irish whiskey and Scotch gets far more interesting than the marketing wants you to believe. 7 of these Irish bottles genuinely beat the Scotch you would buy for the same money. The other 7 are coasting on a green label and a famous accent. Same shelf, same budget, wildly different liquid. By the end, you will know which Irish whiskies under $50 earn their place, and which ones are emptying your wallet. Let us start with the 7 that win. Number 7. Hinch Single Malt. We open with the new kid because the new kid is already embarrassing bottles twice its age. Hinch is a young distillery in County Down that only started laying down its own spirit a few years back, and its first fully homemade single malts landed on shelves recently at a price that makes no sense for what is inside. This is genuine single malt, 100% malted barley from one distillery, matured in bourbon wood and bottled soft and bright. You get green orchard fruit, a little vanilla, a clean malty center, the kind of easy, elegant pour that usually costs a lot more. For around $30, it walks straight up to an entry Scotch single malt like a Glenmorangie Classic at a similar price and holds its own without breaking a sweat. The Scotch has the heritage and the bigger name. The Hinch has the freshness and the surprise. As a first real single malt for someone who thinks Irish whiskey begins and ends with the famous green bottle, this quietly resets the bar. What makes it land is honesty. There is no age statement to hide behind and no centuries-old legend to lean on. Just clean, well-made single malt sold at a fair price by people still proving themselves. And it is the weakest hand in this half of the list, which tells you where we are headed. Number 6, the Tyrconnell Single Malt. It is named after a racehorse that won at 100-1 back in 1876, and the bottle still drinks like an upset. This is a non-age statement single malt, double distilled, matured in bourbon casks and bottled in its current form at a fuller 43% rather than the standard 40 you find on so many budget bottles. That extra strength matters. It gives the whiskey a brighter, fruitier punch, all green apple, honey, and a clean cereal snap, where a lot of cheap Irish whiskey just tastes of soft vanilla and not much else. Put it beside an entry Speyside single malt like a Speyburn 10 in the same low 30s bracket, and the Tyrconnell gives you more fruit, more lift, and more actual single malt character for the money. It is not trying to be a complex sipper that you ponder for an hour. It is trying to be the honest, fruit-forward single malt you reach for on a Tuesday, and at this price it beats most of the Scotch sitting next to it, doing the same job. The standard Tyrconnell rarely gets talked about because it has no flashy finish and no premium price tag to brag about. That is exactly why it sneaks onto this list. It is a proper single malt at a blend price, and it tastes like one. Ireland takes this one on value alone. Number 5. The Irishman, the Harvest. Here is where the recipe gets clever. The Harvest is built from malt and single pot still whiskey only, with no cheap grain spirit padding it out. And roughly a third of the blend is that uniquely Irish pot still character. That is a far richer recipe than the price suggests. What you get is a rounder, weightier pour than a $30 bottle has any right to be, with nutty barley, soft baking spice, and a creamy texture that comes straight from the pot still portion. Stand it next to a Monkey Shoulder, the Speyside blended malt that sits at almost the same price, and the comparison is fascinating. The Monkey Shoulder is 3 Speyside single malts stitched together, smooth and easy. The Harvest answers with that thicker pot still backbone the Scotch simply cannot offer at any price because Scotland does not make pot still whiskey. For the drinker who wants texture and substance rather than just smoothness, this is the better $30 bottle. And we have only just started turning up the volume. Number 4. Connemara Original Peated. This is the one Irish whiskey that walks onto Scotland's smoky home turf and lights a fire of its own. Connemara is a peated single malt, double distilled, the malted barley dried over peat smoke before it ever sees a still, then rested in bourbon wood and bottled bright. The smoke here is softer and sweeter than Scotland's heavyweight island malts, which is exactly the point, where the famous peat monsters can feel like chewing a bonfire on a wet beach. Connemara keeps honey and baked apple in the front seat with the smoke curling gently on top. Line it up against a cheaper Ardmore Legacy or a Highland Park 12 right at $50, both proper peated Scotch, and those have more weight and more menace. But for the drinker curious about smoke who wants something they will actually finish rather than endure, Connemara wins every time. It is also one of the only peated Irish single malts you can reliably find, which makes it a genuine point of difference rather than a copy of Scotland's homework. The double distillation keeps it lighter on its feet than the triple punch of the heavy Scotch, so the smoke arrives as a warm note rather than a wall. Under $50, this is the friendly way into peat, and the bottle a smoke skeptic will actually keep pouring. Number 3. Limavady Single Barrel. Now we get to the bottle the critics fell over themselves for. Limavady is a single malt drawn from a single barrel, bottled at a generous 46%, and matured with a rich cask influence that gives it real depth. This is not a mass-produced ocean of whiskey blended to a formula. It is small, specific, and bottled one cask at a time. The flavour leans into butterscotch, candied peel, and a warm orchard sweetness, polished and grown up in a way that punches well above the $50 shelf. One of the most respected whiskey magazines scored it 94 points and put it in their top 20 Irish whiskies, which is serious company. Set it against a Glenfiddich 12 or a Glenlivet 12, the two single malts every shop pushes at this exact price, and the Limavady matches them for polish and beats them for sheer surprise. Most drinkers have never heard of it, which is precisely why it belongs here. The famous Scotch names sell on reputation built over a century. This sells on what is in the glass, and what is in the glass is excellent. Single barrel bottling also means a little variation from bottle to bottle, which sounds like a risk and is actually the charm. You are getting something closer to a one-off than a mass-produced product, and at $50 that is almost unheard of. Number 2, Bushmills 10-year-old single malt. Forget the standard blend that lives behind every bar. This is a different animal from the same northern distillery. 10 full years in bourbon casks, triple distilled in the Irish style, and bottled into one of the cleanest, most drinkable single malts you will find under $50. Triple distillation is the Irish signature, the extra run through the still that strips out the rough edges and leaves a soft, rounded, almost creamy texture. The result is lively and fresh, or ripe pear, toasted oak, citrus peel, and a gentle honeyed sweetness that keeps you coming back. Here is the kicker. A 10-year age statement single malt for around $45 is a genuine bargain in today's market. Put it beside Glenmorangie, the original, the benchmark bourbon cask single malt from Scotland that sits at almost the same price, and the Bushmills holds the comparison comfortably while offering a softness the Scotch cannot quite match. Real age, real single malt, real value. This is the bottle that proves Irish single malt is not a budget compromise. It is the better buy. Whiskey writers who taste the whole Bushmills range often pick this youngest single malt as their favourite of the lot, ahead of the older and pricier bottles, because the freshness and balance here are hard to beat at any age. When the cheapest single malt in a distillery's lineup is also the one the experts reach for, you pay attention. Number 1. Powers 3 Swallow. If you take one bottle from this half of the list, take this, because it does something no Scotch on earth is allowed to do. 3 Swallow is single pot still whiskey, the style made from a mash of both malted and unmalted barley, triple distilled in copper pot stills, and it is, by law and by tradition, an Irish thing. Scotland does not make it and could not call it that if it tried. The unmalted barley gives this a thick, oily, spice-driven character that single malt simply does not deliver in the same way. Three Swallow is matured mostly in bourbon casks with a small touch of sherry for harmony, and it pours rich and creamy with green apple, marzipan, white pepper, and a long barley finish. A major whiskey magazine named it one of the top 20 whiskies of its year, and it sits at around $45. Stand it next to a Glenlivet 12, one of the best-selling single malts in the world, at the same price. And the Powers offers a weight and a texture the Scotch was never built to have. This is the gold standard of a style Scotland is legally barred from making, sitting under $50, embarrassing half the single malt shelf. That is the case for Ireland, closed. Quick word before the second half. That is the case for Irish whiskey at this price. 7 bottles that genuinely outpour the Scotch sitting beside them, with a single pot still champion at the top that Scotland cannot legally copy. While we've got you here, comment down below where you are watching from and whether you prefer Irish whiskey or Scotch. We always love seeing where everyone lands on this one. Right, now for 7 good Irish whiskies that lose a fair fight. None of these are bad. Everyone is a perfectly enjoyable pour with something going for it. The point is simpler than that. At the exact same price, there is a Scotch that does a little more, and once you taste them side by side, that is hard to unsee. Number 7. Paddy. Let us be fair to Paddy because it is quietly underrated. It is a triple distilled blend that carries more malt whiskey in the recipe than most bottles at its price, which gives it a fuller, more honeyed character than its bottom shelf reputation suggests. As an easy, gentle, mixable Irish blend for around $22, it does its job without complaint. The trouble is what sits next to it on the shelf. For roughly the same money, a Glenmorangie Classic gives you an actual Scotch single malt, 100% malted barley from a single distillery, with cleaner fruit and a longer finish than any budget blend can manage. Paddy is genuinely pleasant. The Glenmorangie is simply more complete, built from better raw material at the same price. If you only want a soft mixer, Paddy is fine. But if you are spending the money to actually taste something, the single malt is the smarter buy, and that is the pattern for this whole half. Number 6, Kilbeggan. Kilbeggan has real history on its side, a distillery town with roots stretching back to 1757, one of the oldest licensed whiskey sites in the world. And the standard blend is an honest, drinkable, everyday pour. It is double distilled, soft, grassy and gently sweet, the kind of bottle that does no wrong at a barbecue, and there is nothing here to apologise for. But for around the same $35, a Speyburn 10 puts a proper Speyside single malt in your glass, 10 years of age, more orchard fruit, more depth, and a finish that actually lingers. Kilbeggan gives you heritage and easy drinking. The Speyburn gives you age, character, and a single malt backbone for the same outlay. Both are good, only one of them keeps rewarding you on the second and third sip, and at this number that edge goes to Scotland. The history is wonderful. The Speyburn is the better whiskey for the money. Number 5, Dunville's 1808. This one is genuinely good, which is exactly why it makes the point so well. Dunville's is a revived Belfast name with real heritage, and the 1808 blend earns its strong reviews, all honey, vanilla and bright orange peel, smooth and very easy to like for around $30. If you want a polished Irish blend, this is one of the better ones on the shelf, no question. The catch is the company it keeps at that price. Monkey Shoulder, sitting at almost the same money, is a blended malt, meaning it is built entirely from single malt whiskies with no lighter grain spirit in the mix. That all malt recipe gives the Scotch a richer, rounder, more textured pour than even a good grain-inclusive Irish blend can match. Dunville's is a lovely everyday whiskey. The Monkey Shoulder is the same easygoing idea made with better building blocks and poured side by side. That difference shows. A close fight, but Scotland takes it. Number 4. McConnell's. McConnell's has done a beautiful job reviving a proud Belfast brand, and the whiskey inside is perfectly respectable. It is a 5-year-old blend of malt and grain, bottled at 42%, a touch above standard strength, soft and approachable, with a light caramel sweetness. For around $32, it is a friendly introduction to Irish whiskey, and there is real charm in the story. But put that same money toward a Glenfiddich 12, one of the world's best-selling single malts, and the gap opens up. The Glenfiddich carries far more age on paper, a fuller pear and oak complexity, and the depth only a long-matured single malt delivers. McConnell's is a likeable starting point. The Glenfiddich is a benchmark. At the same price, you are choosing between a pleasant beginning and a genuine standard, and the standard wins on substance. Nothing is wrong with McConnell's, there is just more whiskey in the glass next to it. Number 3, Glendalough Double Barrel. Glendalough deserves credit because this is a clever, well-made bottle. Double Barrel is a single-grain whiskey aged in bourbon casks and then finished in Oloroso sherry. And that finish gives it a soft, sweet, easy charm that drinks very nicely for around $35. As a smooth introduction to the lighter single-grain style, it does the job with a smile. But single grain is by nature a lighter spirit than single malt, and that is where the comparison bites. A Glenfiddich 12 at a similar price gives you a full single malt, more fruit, more oak, more structure, and a longer finish, simply because malt whiskey carries more weight than grain. Glendalough did everything right with the cask work. The Scotch just starts from a richer base. If you love that soft sherried sweetness, the Glendalough delivers it happily. For depth and value at the price, the single malt is the stronger glass. Number 2. The Whistler Imperial Stout Cask. This is one of the more fun bottles in the whole video, and it earns its place on merit. The Whistler finishes a sherried Irish blend in casks seasoned with Imperial Stout, and the result is genuinely characterful, thick, textured and chocolatey. The kind of pour that wins people over at around $40. The novelty actually works, which is rarer than it sounds. But novelty and completeness are not the same thing. A Tomatin 12 at a similar price is a classic Highland single malt, 12 years old, matured in bourbon and sherry casks with real balance and the polish that comes from age rather than a clever cask finish. The Whistler is a great talking point and a genuinely good time. The Tomatin is the more serious, more rounded whiskey for the same money. One is a fun experiment, the other is a finished article. And when you want depth over a gimmick, Scotland wins this round. Number 1, Lambay. We finish with the bottle that sells the most beautiful story on the shelf. Lambay is built around a private island off the Dublin coast and a partnership with a French cognac house. And to be fair, the cognac cask finish does give the blend a soft, fruity, elegant character. It is a pretty, gentle, triple distilled whiskey that works beautifully in a cocktail, and there is nothing wrong with a light, easy pour for around $27. But light is the operative word. Set it beside an Auchentoshan American Oak, the triple distilled lowland Scotch at a similar price, and the comparison is telling. Both are soft and delicate by design, yet the Auchentoshan carries more vanilla, more fruit, and more staying power, more reason to come back to the glass. Lambay sells the dream of the island. The Auchentoshan, made in the same gentle style, simply gives you more whiskey to enjoy for the same money. A gorgeous idea, narrowly outpoured by the Scot beside it. So there it is. 7 Irish whiskies under $50 that genuinely beat the Scotch you would buy for the same money, led by a single pot still bottle Scotland is not even allowed to make, and 7 good ones that still lose a fair same price fight to a Scotch that offers a little more. At its best, Irish whiskey now goes toe-to-toe with Scotch and wins, and even when it loses, it usually loses by a sliver. Now we will be honest with you. When we put this video together, we had a feeling it might be a controversial one, because picking sides between Irish whiskey and Scotch is never going to please everybody. So we want to hear from the real fans on this one. Whether you are an Irish whiskey loyalist or a Scotch diehard, drop a comment below and tell us whether you agree with our assessment or think we got it completely wrong. That is the conversation we actually want to have, and we will see you in the next one.